Hi, I'm Jay, and today we're tying an old classic ice jig, a Simcoe bug. Stay tuned. So, good morning. It's still morning. I don't have my coffee anymore, but it's still morning. So today I'm at the bench. I'm just tying something fun. We did have a little bit of ice over the Christmas holiday here in central New York State. Was able to get out ice fishing. Have a little bit of a warm snap for the new year. But this coming week looks like it's going to be cold again. And in temperatures that are going to probably stay for the rest of the winter. So I'm at the desk today and I found an old jigs from my collection. There's a bag in here of jigs that I tied not too long ago, maybe 15 years or so. Jigs from my father, jigs from his collection that he got from other tires or in his travels. Though they're all a variation of a Simcoe bug, which is nothing more than a grub pattern. So what's the best way to do this? Let's see. My desk is a complete mess, but let's switch over. Now, to start with, this is a box that was out of from his ice fishing gear that is filled with a lot of different variations that are all, they all appear to be lead bodies. But this is what we're getting at. So this is a modern version. This is from Flies. And I don't know exactly what town they're out of in Canada. I've fished Lake Simcoe a few times. The last year, right before COVID, shut everything down. And I picked these up and I used a couple while we were fishing, but I always buy a couple extra to throw in my collection, right? And what this is, the date on the bag here is 2019. So that was the last year that I was up in Canada. And what we have here is from Flies, Siflies. And it's a Simcoe bug. It's a weighted ice fly. Kind of a grub on a grub type scud hook, a grub hook. It has a rubberized body, that latex body, and with a weighted bead. I don't know if this is tungsten or not. It kind of feels like it. It's pretty heavy. But they come in a few different colors, and I just have a couple here that I saved to throw in the collection bag with all the other jigs. So in that drawer, we have a whole selection of Simcoe bugs that we're going to take a look at real quick. This is one that I did this past week. This is not going to be the best. I will do our best here with this video, but there we go. Perfect. So I tied this just a week or so ago at Christmas time and fished with this. And this is tied in a manner that I was taught as a boy. And as you will see with these old ones. So first we'll start with the ice box. And these were jigs from Dad's ice gear. They don't look like they've been fished with because they're all shiny and most of the eyes are painted over. But here's a lead body, fluorescent paint job. A lot of these have tinsel, like a craft glitter mixed in either with the clear or painted on. Of course, there are different sizes. Some of these look like they're on a regular baitkeeper style hook, a straight shank hook. And this style jig, they're fished usually without anything on the hook, maybe fished alongside some sort of spoon or something with flash. You'll notice that a lot of these, let me see if I can hold this by the eye, just like my example, the body of the jig crowds the bend of the hook. This is primarily a perch lure, though you're going to catch all sorts of fish. I've used them for crappie and bluegill as well as perch. Crowding of the hook point or the bend of the hook is not usually an issue because as soon as you feel that perch commit and you've hooked the fish and you're reeling them up, as long as you keep that line tight, the perch is not going to fly off the hook. And there's been times, here's a good example. And there's been times when we're fishing these in fairly shallow water. Yeah, I'm thinking 15 in that general depth, where you're pulling the line out of the hole. You're touching the ice, letting the fish come off the hook, and then dropping it right back down. No bait, nothing like that, and you're just catching one after another. Here's a couple examples in here that are just like, there's a couple examples in here, also lead bodies that are, the mold has a shape to it, so it looks like a segmented body, but all these are lead. I know these have a name. I do not recall what these are called. They're more than likely in this box because it's kind of a worm type jig. The only weight on this are the eyes, and they're fairly light. Those are the lead bodies, and these are probably from the early 80s. They could be older, but that's my best guess on these. The late 70s and 80s were, at least in my memory, seemed to be a time where guys were going an awful lot to the craft stores, really getting into using tinsel and glitter and things like that, using nail polish that was either fluorescent or the glittery type nail polish. Those, DIY kind of things. In my memory, that was the time. That was when things like that were really popular, and that's exactly what that box reminds me of. And I'm here without my coffee, so I'm coughing a little bit. So this bag, written on it, is Tire Unknown. It was from Dad's collection, and these are weighted, more than likely tied in the way that I'm going to show. This is a very small jig. I'm guessing it's in the 1/60th range in terms of weight. But then here's a much larger hook, And all of these have thread bodies that we're looking at now, even though they look like they're plastic. But basically for these, the hook itself was disguised with the wraps and kind of has that worm shape to it. So some of these are a natural color, some of these are very gaudy color-wise. And the majority of these hooks, you know, there's the larger ones that are obviously bent, but the smaller jigs that we were looking at just now look like a typical dry fly hook with a straight shank, or even a bait holder hook for the jigs that are, I don't know, 6, 8, 10 size maybe. And with the thread, you use the, we'll see as we tie, but when you add the weight, it helps create that bend, that humpback look, as well as the way we wrap. So we're going to use our size A thread to kind of fill in and shape the body. Here's another bag. I do not know who tied these. I don't necessarily think these were from Dad, just because of the colors. Super bright, a lot of oranges, a lot of fluorescent thread. Again, this red and white, or an off-white and red, is pretty much the standard traditional color for the pattern. This one I found interesting because it was a little bit different on how they did the ribbing. And this is a thicker, I don't know if that was a rubber or if it was just a ribbon type of material. But there's a few of them in here with the larger, thicker ribbing like that, but it's just in the middle, which is kind of interesting why they did that. Some will have, like we've mentioned, the glitter mixed in with the paint, like so. There's a few in here that actually have a strip of Flashabou up the back and tied under the ribbing. I always had liked just the natural colors. This one, let me get my glasses. So this one has a line up the back of marker, and then it looks like glitter in the clear coat. Now, because if you tie this with a thread body, you can play with the color just a little bit. If you put a let's say a red base and then you wrap that with the white, when you put the clear coat on, it creates a translucent type body. It'll look a little three-dimensional. It'll look a little grub-like. It'll look like there's guts, right? And then lastly, well, two things. This was something I was just messing around with. Originally, I was shown as a young boy. I tied these with acetate floss, which we'll look at quickly. And these are unweighted examples. And the note on this bag is I tied these 2015. They're unweighted, and I don't remember exactly why I was tying them this way. I was mostly playing with the acetate floss because I had used it as a young boy and then went years without bothering. And I was curious on how well I remembered the acetate being useful. But all of these are tied. More than likely these are a 3399 mustad hook. All very nice. And then lastly, these are bugs that were tied by Dad. They're weighted. And they're thread or floss bodies. I don't know if there's an easy way to tell the difference on these. I'm pretty sure that they're all acetate floss bodies on these. And when you're tying with it, acetate floss is very much like any fly tying floss in the way you tie it. But at the last step is to just coat the jig with acetone, which melts the fibers of the floss and creates that hard candy shell. It would be the same as just coating this with a couple coats of lacquer based head cement. You know, it's that same hard candy shell. But let's so we'll put in the vise. This is the one that I tied just a few days ago, a week or so ago. So this was tied on a size 8 hook. More than likely it was either the Fly Shop TFS 2457 or a Simco, also 2457. They're basically the same hook. This was another one I dug out of the collection. It feels a little spiky. Again, it's the acetate floss that more than likely it was frayed. So some of the body parts were hardened, but when they were kind of sticking out. But as you can see, that's a hard candy shell. And again, the same thing. This one's just a little bit thinner. So how did I even get on this kick? You know, I have plenty of lures and jigs, so just ice fishing last week wasn't the reason I started looking at these, but I actually got a new old book that I'm really looking forward to looking at a bit closer. But it's Ice Fishing for Everybody. It's Byron W. Dalrymple, Lantern Press. A little bit hard to see. And this was published 1948. So there's a section in here that I was reading about ice flies. Was trying to do a little bit of research on ice flies, and what they describe in this book is what you would normally see on a fly river, nymphs in particular, and that's what they were describing for the ice flies. trying to do research and finding different things, I came across the Simcoe, Lake Simcoe, and the Simcoe bug. It kind of like jogged my memory. And that's a jig that I've used. It's a jig that I've tied. Something I was taught as a kid, and it's a lake I really like. Like I said, I've fished Lake Simcoe a few times. It's actually closer for me to drive across the border into Canada and fish Lake Simcoe than it is for me to stay in New York State and fish the Adirondacks. It's a shorter drive, so I kind of miss Lake Simcoe. We always had a good time, but let's try to make this conversation. We'll go full circle. So, as far as I can tell, researching the Simcoe bug, is that there was a local guide on Lake Simcoe, Leon Maloney, who was the originator of the Simcoe bug. I don't know how true that is. There's very little historical information. You don't really see things in the books. In many ways, this was probably just a regional type thing. And like I said, we're pretty close. So I think it's about 4.5 hours drive from where I am along the PA border in New York, in central New York State. My dad, of course, had a house on Oneida Lake for decades. So he was more like 2.5 hours from Simcoe. So I know Dad drove up that way. I know there's guys that came south that had fished up that way. So somehow he learned about the jig itself. And like I said, I remember tying it fairly young. I was in my teens, early teens, when I learned how to tie this jig. When I first learned how to tie this jig, everything was on just a cheap bait holder type hook, an eagle claw. Bait holder type hook worked just fine. 6, 8, 10 was generally the size that we would go with. The shape of the body and that humpback, the profile, and to give it a little bit of weight, I always used the twist ties, the cigarette match style weights. So this is what I would use for the body. Of course, there was always lead wire. You know, what you'd get from your local fly shop. Lead wire was always a good choice for shaping that body and adding some weight. And then this is an old material. I'll just switch over this way. Pulled the camera really close because we're going to tie a small fly. But this is a roll of lead tape, non-adhesive. There's no adhesive on it. It's just a very thin sheet of lead. You can cut this with scissors, so I can trim nice thin strips off of this and use it to weight the body. I don't want to mess up my camera too much. Let's see if we can. Don't know how much we can see, but here's the acetate floss. Comes in many different colors. There's a few, but what we have here is the original hard shell nymph floss. Basically just acetate floss. Green, brown, gray, pink, white. I have other boxes. Here's a second box of that same acetate floss. Goldenrod, black, gunmetal, 3 different types of grays. And you know, I have another 6 or 7 boxes in my collection. Here's another box. It's that same hard shell, brown, olive, pink, gray, black. And today what we're going to end up tying with is, over the years I've kind of played with different things. There was a time when I was, fairly poor before having a family, and I wanted to tie these, but I didn't want to spend any money for floss. When I went away to school, I was kind of far away. I couldn't just like bum materials off my dad, which is probably when I first started tying this with just thread. But I like a smaller profile, so a smaller hook. The largest I would go is maybe a size 8 hook. And that works out pretty well using a size 8 thread. We're going to use something interesting today. This is just a plain nylon thread. This is a Lily brand. This Lily is an old sewing thread company. Lily size A. It was a spool of white that I dyed using tea. I just submerged this in a cup of tea for an hour or two, rinsed it off, placed it in a warm radiator heat, kind of just left it on top for a day, and it's perfectly dry, but it's an interesting color. It's not pure white, it's not pure tan. There's kind of variations. There's light and dark spots, but it's stained thread. But I like this for the body. We're also going to use just a regular red, my Pac Bay size A, and that's it. Hook wise, like I said, I know there's a lot of chit-chatting in this, and I appreciate anybody who stays with us. So we're using a caddis pupa or a shrimp or a scud style fly hook. We talked about the Simco 2457. What else I have here? Dairiki. These are hooks that I really, really like, and it's a shame that they're no longer made. Here's a size 12. This is probably the smallest that I'll go. I also have a 14 here, but 12 I think is, I really kind of like that size for bluegill. But it's the Dairiki 135. It's a scud pupa hook. It's 1x strong and 1x short. So very, very nice hook. It's a shame that they don't make these anymore. Here's the Simco. If I can turn off my face. That's what we're looking at. Here's the Fly Shop, which is also the same. I believe it's the exact same hook. It's the exact same part number. But today we're tying a variation. I like the traditional look and the traditional materials from the 70s, right? But I have a hook here that I really, really like. I don't recall what size this is. I believe this is a 1/32, but it's a lightning strike check nymph lead-bodied hook. So it's a down eye, 2x heavy, 2x short, curved shank with a 2x wide hook. And what I like about these is I don't have to worry about the lead tape or the lead wire. I do recall seeing sometime in my travels Simcoe bug tied with just a small split shot on the hook shank, or the, I don't recall what the weight is called, kind of looks like a hot dog bun style split shot, but it's long, has a long body. I've seen those types of weights used. So, but there we have the Lightning Strike JHCN10. And like I said, I believe it's a 1/32 weight. That's what it feels like to me in my hand. Might be a little bit, might be a little bit off, but it's perfect. Where I'm fishing these, it's generally anywhere, it's 13 to 18 feet. That's it. So in the 15-foot range, basically. I'm using a very light line, a very light jigging rod, and these have plenty of weight to get down where they need to go. And like I said, we're catching primarily perch, but also bluegill, occasional crappie, and other sunfish. Like I've called, we're calling this a variation. We're trying to tie this with the look and some of the materials original that you'd see, from these old examples. We have a more modern hook, and I'm going to finish it with a modern material that I don't think we've seen done in a video. I've been asked over the years, or accused of not using modern materials. I do use modern materials. We've talked about that before. There's things that I'll use on my my fly table that I don't use here with my jigs, just because I consider myself a little bit more of a traditionalist when it comes to jig tying. But let's get this. I think I've babbled long enough. So we do want to place the hook in the vise in a way where it exposes the bend on the hook. So, I do put this in a little cockeyed. The eyes bent a little bit forward. I'm going to start with my red, just because I want this on the hook after I finish with the white. I like the red being underneath the layer of white thread, and then as we finish, the wraps of the red overlap the white. I just like, I think it creates a little bit stronger base. Not that you don't need to be super detail oriented with this jig, mainly because we're going to coat it with a finish, and that hard candy shell keeps everything together. So, but here we have, I've locked on my red thread. I do try to add a few loops just to give something for the white to bite onto. If I had a material holder, I might pull my bobbin away, but I'm just going to set it just off to the side along my the base of my vise, and that should stay out of the way. I do need to change the angle of the vise. It just helps keep the thread from rolling off, because as you see, the eye of our hook is rolled, curved downward. So now we can go in, and I'm going to start my white just anywhere, just to get it locked on towards the tail of the jig. Really move that red out of the way. And now I can just start adding a base of white. I'm basically stopping at each end of that weight. I am leaving the red exposed at the tail. I will leave space at the eye of the hook to finish the hook, or to finish the jig with the red. And right now you're just walking the thread back and forth, sometimes touching wraps, sometimes open wraps, to help build the body of this bug. Now that weight gives it a natural hump as well as the shape of the hook itself. So I'm just kind of following along. Occasionally I will add a couple more wraps towards the center to keep it nice and fat, buggy, worm looking. And then just one more we'll do here. And we take it to the end where I will fix this bobbin. I lock on the white. So I can snip that away. So now I still have my red size A thread here at the tail. I'm going to add a few wraps. Just to clean this up, we're going to follow around the bend just a little bit, and then I can build it up. At the butt of this grub. And there we have a good proportion. It looks good there. So now I can add ribs, basically about 5 rotations with nice open wraps, segmenting this jig up to the nose. And I do have to turn my vise sideways since the hook curves down. It's very difficult to build the head. So I'll turn my vise sideways so I can build a head just like a normal fly. And you're rotating the bobbin, you're rotating the thread perpendicular to the hook shank. So wherever it sits in your vise with that curve, you want to keep the thread perpendicular to your hook shank. And to finish up, I'm just going to finish this quickly. Just a couple turns. This is a very, very simple pattern. You can get as fancy as you would like to make this as realistic as you'd like. But there is the jig basically complete. To finish this off, yes, you can use our lacquer-based head cement and put coat after coat after coat and create a nice candy shell. I am getting out the UV clear. This is just Loon. They're thin. There's all sorts of products out there for the UV resin. Whichever brand you prefer. The thin viscosity works a little bit better at this step because it will even out as we rotate this. And I'm putting a generous amount on this thread. I want to create a nice thick candy shell. I want it to saturate the threads as much as possible. It's a very durable jig, and it is quite hard. It feels like plastic. It feels like a hard plastic body. And like I mentioned, with the point of the hook being crowded, and some people might think that that's an issue, and you'll more than likely miss fish because you can't hook them fully through the lip, let's say. But again, as a perch is looking at this jig and just, kind of touching it with their mouth, just reaching out and giving it a touch, as soon as you feel that contact, you're keeping a tight line and zip them right up the hole. And like I said, a lot of times you'll come up with that tight line, you swing them out of the hole, touch the deck, and then the fish is right off the hook, and then you're dropping it right back down the hole. So I've fished these individually, sometimes alone as the only jig on the line. I've fished them with a spoon at the bottom and the Simco bug sliding up and down the line, farther up the line, and that's worked well. I've tied them in a way where there's a tag that comes off the main line and with a weight at the bottom. I would use that weight to kind of bang the mud bottom and make little clouds of dirt and whatever, which would kind of get the perch real active. I've tipped these with maggots. I've also fished them plain. So a lot of different ways to fish this bug. And it's an oldie from my childhood. I'm sure there's stories from up north, Ontario area, on who invented this, how to use it, how it was originally tied. My UV flashlight has brand new battery, but it seemed a little tacky. I think that should be good. Let's take a look at this real quick. I understand there's a lot of babbling in this one. I hope this did make sense. This is just a fun little ice jig. A Simco bug. If you can find information on this, forward some of that to me. I'm totally interested in learning more where materials and techniques and how things are tied in different regions, different parts of the country, in different states, in different time periods. And as we see in our example here, that's a nice grubby looking jig right there. The color comes out well. That tea color, that stained color. The body looks a little bit darker than it does on my screen. Some of that is the color of the lead, of the weight that's on the hook shank showing through. We could have added a few more wraps of this thread, and it might not be as dark. It'd be more flesh colored perhaps. But that's just something you play with. Every jig is different in that way, even though you're using the same materials. You can adjust the color as simply as adding an extra layer or two of wraps, so you're not seeing that lead, the dark color of the lead showing through. And here's the one that I tied just the other day, a week or so ago. So that has the chartreuse, that washed out chartreuse body. so fun. I'm looking forward to the next week or so. It does look like the temperatures we're going to be back on the ice, and it'll be the main season. It'll be, we're going into mid-January at this point. I'm not exactly sure when this video will air, but right now we're the first week of January, just after the new year. So it does look like we're going to get some cold weather. We're going to be fishing. I'm using these on the small lakes that freeze first. But I think that's going to do it. I hope that things make sense. I appreciate anybody who's followed us so far all the way through this. I'm a little excited about this, so I just jumped on the camera without anything planned. I didn't think about what really to talk about. I just kept piling stuff on my desktop here. Don't forget to talk about the acetate. Don't forget to talk about the different types of lead I have. Had the how do you say this guy's name? I sound uneducated. Trust me, I have degrees. Let's see. It'd be easier to see. Byron W. Dalrymple. Forgive me if I butcher this guy's name. Dalrymple. 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 I grew up in Johnson City, New York. I can pronounce a Polish last name perfectly. Byron W. Dalrymple. But I'm looking forward to actually really diving a little bit deeper into this book. So, Ice Fishing for Everybody by Byron W. Dalrymple. Lantern Press, publishers, copyright 1948. But yeah, I'm looking forward to getting my nose in this book. Maybe tying some of those traditional ice flies from 1948 that are mentioned in the book. I'd like to tie some of those. From what I gather, just a quick glance at that chapter, they're very much like a traditional fly fishing nymph. Very natural looking. It's a natural looking fly. Not like the very colorful, the micro crappie looking jigs that we think about as a ice fishing fly. So I'm what I'd like to do is, if I can gather some good information from this book, maybe find some other examples, and we can tie something traditional, something out of these older publications that are kind of lost to time and history. So some of the information in here is definitely outdated. Spearfishing, I know a little bit about it, but I know we can't spearfish here in New York State, at least for fish. So it's that's something that we wouldn't really talk about or could relate to in some sort of video. But I'm gonna, like I said, put my nose in the book, see if there's good information, see if there's something interesting that we can talk about, particularly when it comes to jig tying. A little rusty. My goodness, I've been off for the holidays and not really done much. I think that's going to do it for us today. So, as always, hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss any new content. Feel free to add any questions or comments, good, bad, or indifferent, down below. Check out the website, jworthhandtied.com. I do have ice jigs on there still. That first cold snap, we did get a few orders, which was kind of nice. But there's still some left on the website, as well as another Universal 2, a pretty nice vise that I picked up. Looks like it was basically purchased and then left on a shelf. Real nice vise. So that was cleaned up, put on the website. You can check that out, jworthhandtied.com. Until next time, tie yourself some Simco bugs and tie lines.